All right, guys. So, to look at, I asked you guys to read two, possibly three, metaphysical poems for this week, and the first one that we are going to discuss is by John Donne, "The Flea." So just a little bit of background on John Donne. He is the considered to be the greatest of the metaphysical poets. He was born Catholic in an anti-Catholic world. He studied religion and law at Oxford, but doesn't graduate because he refuses to take this kind of oath to the Queen because he doesn't believe in her kind of Anglican ideals. So he doesn't graduate because of that, which is kind of a testament to his kind of radical ideals and his radical belief in doing what following the kind of belief of the individual, which is kind of rampant of the age. He becomes this kind of a chaplain under King James I and the dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, which really kind of there's this really kind of interesting two sides to John Donne. There is the kind of sensuous rebel that we see some in The Flea, but there's this other poem that I wanted us to read, and if you dig the metaphysical poetry, I highly suggest you read. It's called Elegy Number 19. It's in your textbook. It's called To His Mistress Going to Bed, and it is this incredibly erotic poem that really kind of contrasts to his later, more religious poetry. So anyways, without further ado, we have The Flea. And I want you guys to think really quickly about a flea. And I'm reminding you all that we are in 17th century England, and fleas are probably everywhere. It is a common insect, I guess, that people would think nothing of. So keep that idea in mind as kind of we go through and look at this poem. So the Flea has three stanzas, and because it is a metaphysical poem, it is shaped in this kind of argument structure. And we can break this down into three stanzas, and the in some ways, this is quite a body or base poem in the sense of look at this flea, it's enjoyed you more than I have, but it's also this really kind of philosophical poem in that in how it treats these kind of concepts of love and marriage. So we have this idea, the conceit in this poem, the metaphor, if you will, is this idea that the flea is like, or the actions of the flea are like sex, and the flea becomes this embodiment of love, this embodiment of marriage. And then once again, it's reverted back to its kind of baser, trivialized nature of sex again. So I want to go through the poem with you guys piece by piece because I know that it is kind of a complicated poem and it's relatively short. So here we have this idea that the flea is like sex, and it is natural for the flea to enjoy this kind of passive speakers. And yeah, I kind of want to put that here. We have here this kind of speaker who is a hopeful lover, and then we have it is directed to this kind of passive female recipient. So we have in our speaker this kind of hopeful lover and this passive female recipient, and the idea of the argument that the speaker intends to make, that hey, look, it's natural that this flea enjoys your body and I want to enjoy it too. So Mark, but this flea And mark in this how little that which thou deniest me is. It sucked me first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou know'st that this cannot be said a sin, nor shame, nor loss of maidenhead, yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells one blood made of two, and this, alas, is more than we would do. So, let's break this down a little bit here. First, we have this dramatic kind of look at this flea. This little bitty trivial flea that it is. It is small. It is common. It is non-consequential, so to speak. And the speaker is using this flea in this hyper, hyper, hyperbolic way, because the speaker intends to prove that the lover is being dramatic by denying him this kind of fulfillment of his desire. And I want to draw your attention to this kind of repetition of the word suck, in that it suggests excitement, and the verb mingled, this kind of renewed fascination at the fact that their blood has been joined. And of course, this kind of mentioning of, I mean, think about it like when a flea, it's bitten him, it's bitten her, and now together their two bloods have been mingled. This mixture of bodily fluids, this mixture of blood, and this idea of blood and mixing is akin to what the 16th century would have seen as kind of intercourse. And we know by line 5, we really get the sense, line 5, that he is trying to talk away these religious ideas that are associated with premarital sex. And it kind of trivializes, like the flea is trivial. He's trying to trivialize this kind of loss of virginity that kind of go against the moral views of the time, because premarital sex for a woman, at least, would be seen as incredibly shameful. It would be a sin because, of course, her, and I'm just saying this is the 16th century or the 17th century perspective, in that her body is her really her sense of currency, of agency. It's all she has really to offer, and loss of that, in some ways the loss of that is the loss of her virtue, her honor. And of course, at the time, you run the risk of becoming pregnant and out of wedlock, and therefore you are no longer marriage worthy. But anyways, he's trying to trivialize these kind of moral religious ideas, that the loss of virginity, the loss of maidenhead, that it is a sin. Premarital sex is a sin, and the shame tied to it is really nothing to be wary about, because look, the flea has enjoyed you. What's the harm in letting me enjoy you too? There's no shame in that. Look how small such a thing is. And their bodies essentially have already mixed in this flea, and it's no big deal. So what's the shame in our bodies kind of doing the same thing? And towards the end of the stanza, we get a sense of his frustration, that this flea gets to do what he wants to do, and yet this enjoys before it woo. Look, you're not demanding the same thing of this flea that you would be demanding of me. And alas, it's more than we would do. So essentially, he's frustrated, but he also resents that the flea gets what he wants without any hesitation. So we move on to stanza 2, which put stanza 2, and we get the feeling that our lady listener is about to kind of pluck the flea away. He says, "Oh, stay. Oh, stop." Right? Don't pluck this flea away. He seeks to save the flea. So, oh, stay. Three lives in one, flee, spare. Where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Though parents grudge and you were met, and cloistered in these living walls of jet, though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be a sacrilege, three sins and killing three. So we have here, like I said, this kind of the speaker who's seeking to save the flea, and by saving the flea, preserve their fluids. Three lives in one: the flea, the man, and the woman. And this is kind of this humorous kind of witty way of metaphor. They've been intimate through this flea. It's special. They shouldn't want to lose it. And it's not a normal flea. It is now holy. It is a holy flea because at the start of the stanza, it is referred to as the Trinity, three lives in one, right? So the three entities of God in one, three lives in one. So this flea, it is now holy. It suggests this kind of spiritual union that transcends the physical. So now we're moving beyond the physical and we're talking about the spiritual nature of their union. This kind of imagery with the marriage bed, the marriage temple, these religious connotations that move beyond the physical into something spiritual. And the moment blah, 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 sorry, I can't read my own notes. The moment here where he says, though parents grudge and you were met, suggests that he has tried to woo this woman before and failed. So she doesn't want any, he's been rejected. Yet we don't really know the circumstances of this poem. They aren't really clear to us. But this line here, cloistered in these living walls of jet, it could mean that they are alone together in the dark. So it's them, this flea, and their mingled bloods all into this kind of insect together. But by the end of this stanza, he notes that she is growing incredibly frustrated. The flea is annoying. He is annoying, right? Though use make you apt to kill me. Though he might want to kill me. Please spare the life of 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 the flea. There's this kind of emphatic nature of his plea that he says not only would she be killing the flea, this holy flea, right? She'd be killing him, herself, and that is sacrilegious because the flea is holy. Their union is holy. And by killing the flea, it would be this destruction of a holy union. It would also be murder, which is a sin, and it would be suicide, which is a sin. So it's this kind of don't kill the flea. It's sacrilegious. So it's kind of this humorous metaphor. So, anyways. That does not stop her from killing the flea. The flea is killed, and she is quite triumphant in winning over his logic by killing this flea. He says, "Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee. Yet thou triumphst, and thou sayest thou findest not thyself, nor me the weaker now. So I want to kind of break this down a little bit. So she's killed the flea, and he says that, why did you do that? The flea was innocent. It was only thing that it did, the only thing that it's guilty of is that it took some blood from you. Why did you kill it? And another thing, it kind of goes back to this, killing this flea. Okay, so you've killed this flea. It's easy, it's trivial. My request is just as innocent as this flea's actions. Having physical contact with me is just as innocent. And then he says, okay, I've got my answer. You've killed the flea. And you're all triumphant, but I'm not the weaker because I can turn my argument. So she's thwarted again. Her celebration is short-lived because he kind of rejects her sentiments and turns it into another argument, which in turn he says, if killing the flea is nothing, if it's so easy to kill this flea, why should loss of your honor not be the same thing? Your fears, look how false they are. Um, Your honor is wasted by denying me. And he says, why should sex with me be so serious? And the last two lines really drive home that his desire to kind of get that final word in. He says, learn how false, look how silly your fears are. The flea has caused you no harm. How much harm could physical contact with me be? So, and we don't really get a response or an answer to our poet, but essentially he's making this argument that, and it's kind of this very, if you stop and think and look back on it, it's this very bizarre metaphor, but it's a very compelling argument. Whether or not she accepts or refuses, we don't know. Essentially, we get the fact that she's refused this argument. She kills the flea, but we don't know how she's going to respond to the next one. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to pick up with our last of the metaphysical poems and John Donne's A Valediction of Forbidding Mourning. So stay tuned.